In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at arrays, but we're going to take a look at something called a two-dimensional array. So at this point, you've probably done arrays before, where you have like a stack, kind of like an apartment building on different floors. Now we're going to actually do a two-dimensional array, which is sort of like a grid or a chart. So instead of just having going up, it's actually going to go up, but also across. So it's going to be, like I said, sort of like a chart or a table or a grid. So the code I have right here is sets up an array of cars. So it's going to hold 5 cars. But I'm actually going to make it a two-dimensional array. So it's going to have rows and columns instead. So I add 2 square brackets again, and it's going to be a 5 by 4 two-dimensional array. So sort of what I'm simulating here is a parking lot with 5 rows and 4 columns, and then I can set some cars up. So for example, in spot 1, 2, I can put a BMW. So that's going to be in that parking spot. And I can put all different cars in all different spaces. Let's say 2, 3 gets a Lexus. This one gets a Chevrolet. Let's say it's 3, 1. And there's even spots 0, right? So 0, 2 could get a Ford. And all the different cars will go in different spots. Now be very careful. The highest row, because there's 5 rows, the highest row is actually going to be 4. And there's 4 columns, so the highest column is actually going to be column number 3. So you've got to be careful with that because all arrays start at 0. And there's also going to be a spot 0, 0. So for example, I can make cars at spot 0, 0 equal a Lincoln or something. So that's how we can set up all of our cars. Now to output those to the screen, we don't want to have to go through and output them all, so we can actually generate a for loop. So I've added some code here that actually includes 2 for loops. So my first for loop, I'm using this counter called R. In other words, that's going to count the rows, so it's going to go through each row. And then I have what's called a nested for loop. So basically it's a for loop inside of a for loop, so we're getting a little freaky here. We've got this one that's going to go through the columns. So column equals 0, as long as it's less or equal to 3. This R++ would be the same as having R equals R plus 1. So it's the exact same thing, it's just a bit of a shortcut. We go R++ to basically make R go up by 1 each time. If I run this, we're going to get all the cars outputted. You notice some are null because we didn't put anything in there. But we'd like to have them sort of more of a grid and more of a table. So instead of print lining every time we output the car value, I'm actually just going to use print. And then once it's done that entire column, then it's going to output an actual space there. So now we're getting a little bit closer to our actual parking lot. Now things are going a little crazy because of the size of the words. So because Lincoln obviously has a lot more letters than BMW or Ford, then things are going a little crazy. There is a solution to that. It's going to be a little advanced, but I'm going to take you through it here. Okay, so I've changed the code around here. Right about here is where most of the code that I've added. This is going to output the name of the car. So this outputs, let's say, Lincoln. And then what this for loop here does is it figures out how many spaces to leave. So it reserves 25 spaces for a car name. And then you subtract from 25 how long the actual name is. So let's say Lincoln, L-I-N-C-O-L-N, has 7 letters. So 25 minus 7 would be 18. So 25 minus 7 equals 18. So this loop will go from I equals 0 as long as it's less than 18. So it'll output 18 spaces. Let's see, you have something like Ford, so 25 minus 4, because Ford has 4 letters, so that would output 21 of these spaces. So in the end, the width of that column would always be 25, no matter how long the word is. Now I'm not going to run this because I've got a lot of variables that don't have values, so that's going to trip up the program. But this chunk of code would be the best way to be able to format things to the screen. Specifically for how long each word is. So if a word has more or less values in it or characters in it, then it will still output and have the same width of a column.